Hey guys, Shamrocked here with a quick feedback video. This is for the way that Mythic Plus scaling is working in the War Within, and just a concern that I have. So I mean, I don't have a lot of subscribers on my channel, so this isn't, trying to make a big buzz. I'm just adding my voice to the, into the pot so that if other people step up and also have, voice concerns about this, it might be something that gets changed in the future. However, if the season starts and they either fix it or this ends up not being an issue, then nobody else is going to complain and it doesn't matter anyways. So I figured it couldn't hurt to just voice what I believe is going to be an ongoing concern with this season. So with that being said, like I said, this video is about the scaling and the level of difficulty that happens going from an 11 key to a 12 key during season 1 of the War Within. And it kind of stems from them fixing the scaling on the beta. So the way it worked for most of the beta is I guess they had a coding error or something. So the 20% the 20% extra damage that comes from the Xal'atath's Guile affix that happens on a plus 12 key was not actually applying. So the damage increase, the scaling from an 11 to a 12 key was actually just the normal scaling it would have been without that affix. And we'll get into the breakdown of what the scaling is between key levels in just a minute. But before I talk about that, I just want to quickly just give a little disclaimer. So I love a challenge when it comes to games. Like that is my favorite thing. If you took away the title achievement and you took away the IO system, I would still do Mythic Plus because that is the most challenging content that I find, and it's where I find my enjoyment of playing this game. Right? I love getting together with a group of people and really having to focus for a set amount of time to overcome something and then practice at it too for those really hard keys. I do love that aspect. So I am not in any way, shape, or form complaining about the difficulty of the keys. I think that the difficulty is great. And if I had it my way, if I, won the lottery one day, I would love to just spend every day playing Mythic Plus, and basically pushing as high as I possibly could before I mathematically could not push any higher. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in, probably for the best. But keep in mind, I love the difficulty, so I'm not complaining about that at all. I'm basically going to be complaining about how we get to that difficulty level. Okay, so before we get into that, let's just take a quick look at the modifiers, right? So on the screen in front of you, I put the modifiers courtesy of Wowhead for basically going up key levels. So let's just go through the affixes first. So at a level 2, you get the Xal'atath's bargain keys, and that is from level 2 to 11. Okay, so these bargain affixes, from what I experienced on beta, are super easy. They're not hard. Like, you don't really have to think about them or coordinate them. As long as you have a group of people who know what their class abilities are, you should be able to handle these no problem. And they add quite a bit of player power, so they're nice to have affixes. They're very minimal on the amount of difficulty they add, and they're very the buff that they add to the players throughout the key is pretty significant. So they definitely, in terms of like, do they make the key harder or easier? Easier by far. On a level 4, you get fortified or tyrannical, which we've had in the past. I shouldn't have to explain those. And then at level 7, we get a new one called Challenger's Peril. So Challenger's Peril is a really annoying affix. I don't think they needed to do this, and I don't understand the reason they did, and we'll maybe get into that. But this causes 15 seconds to be subtracted from the dungeon timer when somebody dies rather than 5 seconds, which is pretty substantial, right? Like, if you have a wipe, you're going from 25 seconds to, what is it, like 60 seconds? So it's huge. It's a very big disadvantage with this, the way that keys are going to work. At level 10, you get fortified and tyrannical together. So this is a new thing. Actually, I kind of like this. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. But basically, once you get to a key level 10, both the bosses and the trash are going to be equally as hard. And then finally, at level 12, you get the Xal'atath's Guile. So this is the affix that removes the bargain affixes that happen from 2 to 11. And if you remember just a moment ago, I said that those affixes make the keys much easier. So already, just by removing those affixes in general, your keys are going to be a lot harder. You're missing a lot of player power that they offer. But in addition to removing those, you also get a flat 20% increase on the health and damage of all enemies in the dungeon, right? So that includes bosses as well. So it's just overall an increase in the level of difficulty mathematically, but it's also an increase in the level of difficulty because they're taking away some of the player power that the Xalatas bargain affixes included. All right, so we go back up to the actual modifiers. The modifier from an 11 to a 12 is just under 30%, right? So it's from 159 to 185%. And you can see the level 13 is just under 30% over the level 12. So it goes to 214%. If you add the Xalatas Guile, you're going from 159% to 205%, which is just under the 13. So mathematically, you're effectively adding a key level, right? So from an 11 to a 12, it's like going up 2 keys, as well as losing your bargain affixes, which, like I said, make the key easier. So you're also adding that level of difficulty as well. Now, once again, like I said at the beginning, I have no problem with the difficulty. What I have is the huge disparity in the jump that happens there, because traditionally the way keys have worked is every key level is like a stepping stone, right? Or like if you look at a staircase, each one is a step, right? The way that this season is working, once you get to 11, it's not just one step up, it's basically like 3 steps up, right? Like you have to make a massive leap in order to get to reach and match that level of difficulty. All right, so I'm going to put on the screen 2 videos. It's the same boss actually. So it's City of Threads, the last boss. The top video is with the Xalatas Guile affix working, so you're having that 20% extra damage. And the bottom video is with it before, when it was broken, so it wasn't adding that 20% damage. You can see right off the bat the significant difference between the 2 videos, right? So the splice, which is the dot that goes on everybody, is just ticking so much harder on that top video, and the slam and umbral weave abilities are hitting people for like 75% of their health instead of 50, right? Which is a significant difference. And what it means, like putting it into context, is on the previous 12, before the scaling was fixed, I was able to sort of half plan up my cooldowns for this level of key, and just use my general kit and then supplement with a cooldown if needed, if I fell behind, or whatever. With the new scaling, and keep in mind, this is like from an 11 to a 12. I shouldn't have to be doing this yet based on previous experience in previous seasons, working up the title keys. But for this 12, with the new scaling, I had to literally use and plan a cooldown for every single damage event, which, thank God they've given us a couple of cooldowns, or sorry, a couple of talents that reduce cooldowns of our major throughput abilities this season, mainly Ascendance and Healing Tide if you're taking them. Because like I said, you need something powerful for each and every single one of these damage events, and they all happen like 25 seconds apart. So it's just so punishing, which, like I said with my previous disclaimer, like I enjoy that, punish me all you want. But the fact that this is happening right, like from an 11 key, which is easier in terms of, like, much easier in terms of the percent damage and health modifiers that are being applied to it, but also because you have those Xalatas bargain affixes, which just add so much to player power, assuming you're doing them correctly. The jump is just so crazy. And I do think it really lends itself to people who've pushed Mythic Plus before and who've pushed title keys before. I think they're going to be fine. They're, it's a challenge, but they're going to be able to meet up to it. What I'm really concerned about and worried about are the people who are trying to do this for the first time, right? So, and if you're like a grizzled, Mythic Plus player watching this and you're like, nah, I just want the challenge. Well, yeah, so do I. But it's not fair to the people who are, for the first time, trying to push into this content, right? If you think back to when you were first pushing Mythic Plus, if you are a seasoned title player, like when I look back to the first season of Dragonflight, I, think that I was so lucky to have a sort of stepwise fashion to grow my skill, to hone my abilities and what I could do per key, and to really intimately learn each and every single pull and every boss at a stepwise fashion to really push up to the high level where you get title. Right now, you are unable to really do that. You have your 11 key, which you're going to find too easy, and then you go to your 12 key, which is just going to be too hard for the average player who's never made that jump before. And I feel like it's just very jarring and very unhealthy for the Mythic Plus community, because it's going to discourage people from playing. A lot of players who are trying to reach into this content for the first time, they're either pugging or they're making a team of other players who are also pushing this for the first time, right? So those players are going to go into this, they're going to go all confident from, slamming an 11 with no issues at all, two chesting it, whatever, going to a 12 where they can't even get past the first pull, right? So yeah, I just really disagree with the jump and the difficulty. I think I mean they could decrease the scaling from Zalatas Guile by about 10%, and I think that would just really solve a little bit of the issue that I'm seeing here because, like I said, before they fixed Zalatas Guile, the jump from an 11 to a 12 felt normal, which I guess makes a lot of sense because it was normal. But with the 20%, it just seems like a little bit of overkill. It's very almost like discriminatory to people who don't have the resources and the friends to push higher from past seasons. Like I said, if you're new to this, good luck to you because you're gonna have to, get lucky and make some friends fast who are really good at the game in order to push up there. Because I don't think this is going to be doable for a lot of pugs. Another big issue that I have with this is that I believe it's going to cap the level of dungeons that people can do much quicker, right? So if people are only able to push 13s and 14s before it gets to the point where either A, the enemies have too much health, so you can't do the dungeon within the allotted time, or B, that damage output that the bosses and enemies do is just so high that you can't live, it means that you're just never going to be able to push that key. It doesn't matter how much gear you get, how much better you get with skill. If mathematically you're unable to push past a certain point, that's your cap, right? So I think people are going to reach that cap much sooner just due to the way that this scaling works. And there's two things wrong with that. First, people are probably going to reach that point fairly quickly. Once, maybe a month or so after the season starts and people are somewhat min-maxed with their gear, you're going to see people pushing those keys, which is nice that we're going to be able to do it that quickly as in previous seasons, but not nice if you're capped, because then you're going to reach that cap, 2 months in when the season is, 4 or 5 months long. What are you supposed to do for the second or, the last 2 or the last 3 months? You're not going to do anything. You're going to quit the game, right? Unless you're someone who's also raiding. So there's that issue. And then two, with a quicker cap like that, if the majority of title players, like the 0.01% of players, are capped at like a 14 or a 13, it's going to come down to not the level of key that you can push, but how fast you can push it. And what I mean by that is if there's nobody out there who can push a 15 and then more than 0.01% of the Mythic Plus community are able to push that 14, the 0.01% is going to come down to how fast you completed the key, not that you did complete the key. And I'm hoping that makes sense, meaning that, if you have 5 groups and they've all completed the 14, the winner is going to be who completed it the fastest, right? So those are the issues I find with, or that I can think of with capped keys that I really think is going to be, possibly an issue moving forward. Possible solutions, like I think there are 2 things that I'm thinking of. First is, reduce Guile by like 10% or something, just reduce the scaling. Inevitably, they're going to end up nerfing a lot of the dungeons anyways, the mechanics, the bosses, whatever. It always happens every single season. So that might address that anyways, but I think that doesn't address the jump between 11 to 12. And like I said, my biggest issue with that is that it really could discourage newer players who are trying to push into this content for the first time. Another solution that is a little bit more creative and out there, but I think would really lend itself to this style of Mythic Plus that they have set up for this season, is adding sort of like a practice mode to your key. So basically you hit a notch or something, and practice mode is turned on, and this way your key won't deplete, but at the same time you can't time it. So even if you complete the key within the time frame, it doesn't count towards your score or something like that. And I think if you gave players the ability to practice a key that way, then it would make it so the players trying to push into this gap, like I said, for the first time, will have a way to practice these keys. And you could counter that and say, well, you know what, who cares if you deplete the key? You could just spend, hours practicing that 12 you depleted. Like, you can still do a key after you're not going to time it. But the issue with that comes from a lot of expertise and practice is the best way to practice a key is by practicing it in the way that it's actually going to play out in real life, meaning the way the timings of your cooldowns coming up, the pace that you have to take, right? So sure, you can spend 5 hours progging a 12 key just to practice, But when you go to do that key in real life and really try to time it for real, your cooldowns are not going to line up the same way. Like I said, your pacing's not going to line up the same way. Your route might be a little bit different, right? So I think adding some sort of practice mode would be very beneficial to this style of Mythic Plus. And I can actually say that. So I was someone who, with the idea of being able to not deplete keys, meaning that you could just do the same level key over and over, I used to hate that in previous seasons or previous expansions, just because I was like, oh, it takes away from the difficulty, and then you can just have players just hitting their heads against a wall until they finally get it. And I do agree. I still stand by that for the way Mythic Plus worked previously. But now, because of the jump and the added difficulty from an 11 to 12, I do think having some form of practice in order to do these keys would decrease the player frustration that is going to happen inevitably when half of the groups trying to push into a 12 wipe on the first pull every single time they do it, because they don't have a way to practice it properly. So yeah, I just think that's going to add to a lot of player frustration. And then one of my probably my biggest issue when I think about my enjoyment of the game is I feel like this is going to add a lot of stress to a lot of players, and it's going to make people lash out and be angry at each other. So we all know, anybody who's pushed Mythic Plus, it's easy to get frustrated when people make a mistake, or to get mad, or to be a little bit toxic. And I think what's nice actually is once you get to higher levels with keys, you'll find actually that a lot of the community is not toxic like that. If people make a mistake, you brush it off your shoulder and you try again, or you drop group politely or whatever. But I think with the new difficulty level and the new jump from an 11 to 12, it's going to cause people to get angrier, because like I said, one single mistake, one death is going to cost you 15 seconds. And when you're getting to a 13 or a 14 key, that's it. That's all you need. You just need that one death and your key's bricked. So it puts a lot of pressure on the DPS to stand out of stuff and not make mistakes that are going to kill them. It puts a ton of pressure on the healer, like a absolute ton, especially because they've changed the way tanking works. Now your tanks are more reliant on your healers. The pressure on the healer is going to be insane. And the anger towards healers that people who've never healed before are going to have. Or even people who have healed before, but just, are angry people. It's not going to be fun for a lot of players. I feel like you're going to see a lot of people drop off and quit the game because of the way that this is working. And then tanks too. Tanking is really, really hard this season from what I've seen in the beta. Like, very difficult. And it's a lot different than how it was, the entire previous expansion. So you're going to see a drop off of tanks and healers, and that's going to cause just a lot of grief for people who are trying to pug their way up into the higher levels of keys. And then lastly, I just think this is also going to have a bit of an effect on the meta as well. So if you're capped on a key by how much you can live or by how much damage you can do, there's the top, like I said, the famous Mythic Plus players are going to figure out a way to get past that. And they're going to do it with very specific comps, maybe very specific trinkets, very specific strats that cheese things based on comps, just like we've seen in the past, but on a whole other level. And that is going to be awful for the meta, because if the only way to push up a key level is having a certain set of classes, then, people who want title are going to have to play those classes much more than even before. I mean, we've seen some pretty awful stagnant metas over Dragonflight, like horrible. I mean, season 2 was just a complete mess until they sort of nerfed things. Season 3 and season 4 had the exact same meta. Season 4 had the same meta since literally week 1 right up to the last week of the season. And that's no fun, right? So I don't think that this new way of doing Mythic Plus that they've implemented, the new scaling system, is going to help that at all. I think it's actually going to do the opposite and maybe even hurt it more for those people who want title. And then, as we all know, what the meta comp for title key pushers are, that's always going to trickle down for whatever reason into people who are pushing any level of key. They're going to want to be looking for a specific class, which is not healthy for the game at all, especially because up to an 11 key, you can use any class, any comp, you'll be fine. It's not hard, right? So it's really just going from that 11 to the 12. So, but yeah, all this video was just to sort of complain about the scaling and just the abrupt difficulty increase that happens from an 11 to 12. I don't see any reason for that to happen. I like the creativity of getting rid of the bargain affixes and adding a new affix that does increase the difficulty just based on pure scaling. I do think that's a nice way to do it. However, I don't think 20% is the number that they need to be, starting with. But anyways, like I said, just adding my voice to the pot. If anybody else also has concerns about this, I'm sure we'll hear about it. If not, this video will fade into nothingness and all is good. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you next time.